Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf. Here. Vice President Ruttenberg.
Here.
President Kaplan.
Here. Okay, are there any additions to the agenda? Is there any public comment from anyone from any items on the agenda? Truthful or untruthful? Okay, next is the consent agenda. We are going to remove item E, approval of ordinance 2020-03 to talk about at the next workshop meeting, and for now we will remove item M, approval of resolution 2024 to grant non-exclusive utility easement and covenants to Albion. With those items be removed,
I move adoption of the consent agenda.
thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Roxanne, can you call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Bernstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf. Vice President Ruttenberg.
Aye.
President Kaplan.
Aye.
We're good.
Okay, all items but E and M are... That's you.
I don't know why that happened.
Are approved. If Commissioner Bernstein
Yes.
will leave the room.
I am, as I've done on all matters regarding that, the Albion matter, I'm recusing myself.
Don't go far.
And don't listen.
Okay, let the record show that Commissioner Bernstein recused himself from the meeting at 6:02 p.m. Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda item M, approval of resolution 20-04 to grant non-exclusive utility easement and covenants to Albion?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roxanne, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein. Commissioner Grossberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Yes.
President Kaplan.
Aye. Motion carries. Jeff, can you tell Callie to come back?
Let the record
Always like Jeff Smith.
I move that we delete that comment from the public record.
Just strike it.
They've said worse.
Oh, no, you didn't hear him.
Okay, Jeff, while you're here, unfinished business, Rosewood Beach.
Okay, so following up from the last meeting on Rosewood Beach, as the board will recall, at the workshop meeting, we reviewed the options that Smith Group had provided the district for each of the coves at Rosewood in regards to erosion at the site. And from there were some recommendations that the staff had made that the board felt were ideal. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the coves and talk about what we've done since then. And with that said, we'll start with the Interpretive Center Cove. So at this
Hey,
cove...
Can you hold on a second? I
Sure.
want to get it up in my... Okay, thank you.
So the Interpretive Center Cove, what staff had recommended at the previous meeting was to focus on back of beach revetment. And there was, as we talked about, the Interpretive Center building has a sheet pile wall in front of it, but we are recommending adding additional stone revetment in front of that. And then also a sheet pile wall revetment in front of the parking lot. So from the last meeting, it was discussed that staff would go back to Smith Group and get pricing on this project for construction documents. So the plan is that if we were to do construction documents now, we could be ready to bid this out in the fall if we so chose to do so. That decision wouldn't have to be made till later. So with that said, we have a proposal from Smith Group. It would be $25,500 for construction documents for this portion of the project. That's going to include pre-application meetings with regulatory agencies, completing permitting applications, and also the construction documents and specs for bidding. And we've worked with Smith Group to refine our numbers. The estimated construction cost for this cove would be $430,900, which would bring the total estimated project to $456,400. And as I stated, at this time, staff would be recommending moving forward with entering into a contract with Smith Group for the construction documents. that would allow us to be ready, possibly in the fall or in the future, to do this work.
Can I ask a question while that picture is on the screen?
Oh, sorry, I backed it up. Can I go back?
Yeah, it would help, I think.
Yeah, here we go.
There is a gap between the two red lines. And is there a suggestion that we're not going to close the gap?
Yeah, the initial proposal was to keep it separated, but this is something, if we went into the next step, that we would work closer with Smith Group. And we could look at that in further detail.
How many feet in distance is there?
It's about 75 feet on each section.
It's like this
No.
much.
Oh, distance between the few, yeah.
What is the distance between one end of the red bar and the other end?
Probably 10 feet.
And isn't that where the beach,
Beach yoga?
no,
There's a
the
boardwalk?
benches.
There's a boardwalk there.
The boardwalk and the
Boardwalk
benches.
there, yeah.
I mean, if we're going to protect the parking lot and the interpretive center, shouldn't we extend it 10 feet and protect the boardwalk and the benches?
We can certainly do that.
We asked her that last week, and it was just her opinion, I believe, that the boardwalk can withstand
Big word.
that. And it was just an extra cost that she was looking to avoid.
But the boardwalk could withstand it because it has deep pilings. But that doesn't mean that they won't be undermined, and it does not mean that boards wouldn't get ripped up by a big tidal surge. And so I think what I'm hearing is a consensus that we protect it, but I also want to know why we're not going to do riprap there.
In front of the parking lot?
Yeah.
Because this is something they've worked on. The short answer is it's not possible. Because in order to make you would have to put it in front of the bench, and they've calculated it would have to be so high that it would be above the height of the boardwalk to be effective. And so instead, because you can't build it under the boardwalk because the piles and everything are
Understand.
there, and so we've then gone with the sheet pile between the boardwalk and the parking lot.
I understand. Okay.
Kel?
It was my recollection that the estimated costs for the repairs to this cove were significantly less than what this number is. Am I right or wrong?
You're right. The number is higher.
Okay, so can you explain why there's been such a large increase in the estimated cost?
So this is working with Smith Group on as we continue to refine the focus on this, and so this is their estimate now. There isn't any significant change in the scope of the work.
So what's the difference in the methodology for creating the initial quote than this quote that would lead to such a large difference?
So the initial quote was more of an estimate. What's happened now is I didn't include them up here, but I'm happy to share them with the board. I have detailed breakdown estimates now that includes mobilization, soft cost, contingencies. And this is something they've provided us now, and this is the cost we have now.
I mean, I would like to see, to compare the apples and apples, what Terry was talking about that we saw at the last meeting,
Sure.
and then what we're seeing here, because again, I think it's significantly higher than what we saw last time. In addition, with regard to staging and things like that, if we're doing, when you come back to us with these numbers, what the savings would be if we're doing multiple projects at the same time versus doing standalone projects. I'm talking about multiple coves versus just doing one cove.
I have that information.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so, like I said, I can go back to Smith Group and we can talk about the difference in price, but they did not provide us a breakdown for the previous. It was much more of an estimate, so this is much more of a refined price.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next code. So the swimming cove, the last meeting, we discussed a few options, and in the end, felt that the back of the beach revetment would be the most ideal. The question was whether or not this was something the board and the district were going to move forward with sooner than later. So staff did move forward with getting a quote from Smith Group for construction documents and construction estimate for this. So construction documents would be $13,200. Construction estimate, $356,400 for a total project cost of $369,600. And you'll likely notice that this is actually significantly lower than the original estimate for this cove. And that's in part because of looking closer at the project and refining the numbers. But secondly, one of the questions that we had at the last meeting was, it's kind of hard to see from a distance here. Commissioner Grossberg had asked, it says 245 feet. So I'm showing a drawing here that shows you what the 245 feet are, which was the original proposal. So this is the concession stand. Here's the seating area for the concession stand, and these are the restroom buildings. So there's a portion of the boardwalk that kind of comes out a little bit, so it was taking that entire portion and running revetment along that all the way down here. So we worked with Smith Group we asked the question, well, in order to protect the key structures, how small, how much can we reduce it? And their recommendation was to reduce it down to 173 feet. So this new proposal reflects that price in that distance.
Jeff, where is the guardhouse?
Guardhouse, can't even see it, it's over here.
No, it's right there, isn't it?
Right there? Oh, it's right there?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm missing it, it's right there.
So that's far enough back that there's no thought
Everyone
that
feels that way, yes.
so it's not at risk.
So, I guess I would ask my fellow board members, here, I know I feel comfortable protecting the structures, but that leaves boardwalk unprotected. When we went to the interpretive cove, we had an issue with leaving the boardwalk unprotected.
But I think
So is there a
that
difference?
the distance
Okay,
between the edge of the water and the edge of the boardwalk here, if you look at the bottom left,
so
is substantially more than the distance between the edge of the water and the boardwalk by the interpretive center.
So is that true? Or is that just this picture at this time, I guess? Is
No, I would agree with that. I mean, you can see here, this is actually larger than the distance here, it's 246 feet, 45 feet. Those other two small red lines on the previous one were, let's see if I can get back to it. Each of these represents about 75 feet.
Yeah, but what Brian is asking is the distance from the water's edge
Oh, I'm sorry.
to the boardwalk, right there,
To the area we're
to
protecting.
the area that we're not.
Oh, yeah, yes, it's this structure goes out a little further than it does, especially this bench right here. Goes out
That's
further.
further from the water. or
I'm sorry,
closer
closer to the water. It goes out further, so it's further east.
Okay. So you, in your opinion, then, do you think it's important to protect the boardwalk in that picture less so than the boardwalk in this picture?
Yeah, and you can see here the distance between that portion of the boardwalk is much closer than the other one. Here you can see the guardhouse. I think it's probably right there. So you can see the distance from the shoreline
Mm-hmm.
to the guardhouse. And the other idea here is while we feel confident that we won't have issues with this boardwalk here, it does serve as the entrance to the building. So if for some reason we lost that section of boardwalk, we couldn't easily access the building. So it does make sense to extend it there.
I think what Margaret, if she was here, what she would say is that the wave energy is generally coming from the northeast, and that's why, on this diagram, that's why she's trying to protect that area, because that's the area that's most exposed. Where you see the guardhouses, you have the beachfront protection system that's out there. You have that long beach, so there's really not an issue. I think the area that I think you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, is that the additional boardwalk area that is north and south of that 173 foot portion. And what I'm guessing, if Margaret was here, is that she does, especially on the northern side, there shouldn't be a wave energy on that portion that would create any issues. I know Barney's cringing.
That's good.
And the south, again, I'm not a coastal engineer, but I'm looking, the south may be a little bit more exposed, but then again, it's farther west, and there's more area between
Okay.
that's what I'm assuming Margaret would say if she was here.
Right. I mean, I was advocating for the smaller coverage here. I just want to make sure that we were consistent with both, and I see that the reason why we don't have to be consistent.
Now, Barney's cringing, so what are you thinking, Barney?
Didn't realize I was cringing.
Yeah.
Do we
I'm
have,
going to play poker with you.
oh, no, I always lose. Do we have a cost if we were to do the 245-foot area?
I don't have it on me, but I can get back to you on it.
Now, I understand the logic of doing what doing, and yes, generally speaking, the wave action comes from the northeast. And so it would be rushing
Mhm.
that way, and I understand that.
And secondly, the focus was on the key structures.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the thought process was that if we had some damage to some of the boards on the boardwalk, that's going to, the cost benefit of putting
Right.
another revetment along the entire section there would
And
be significant.
we may make a decision to put in the sandbags. Right? When the winter starts, if we see a need.
Well, Brian and I were talking earlier today. I mean, we were on the right path with having Smith Group do this. I mean, I've been reading in the paper that Smith Group's being hired by many of the communities up and down the shoreline. Chicago, I think, hired them. Would you say Wilmette hired them? Wilmette hired Smith Group. So this is the group that's going to help manage the entire lakefront up and down the the western side of the lake.
And I will add that when we were working earlier on with another group, it was Stature Foundations who worked on this project. They're the ones who actually installed the revetment in front of the Interpretive Center building and all the piles for the boardwalk. So in reaching out to them, they felt that the back of the beach revetment makes the most sense at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
One more cove.
One more call, right?
So far, we spent $840,000.
We haven't spent anything yet.
So-
Levels are going to go down. We don't have to worry about this.
So if we were to move forward with the construction documents now for both the interpretive cove and the swimming cove, and then let's say in the fall we chose to do the construction for both, it would reduce the total estimated cost for this cove by about $60,000.
That's the economies of scale.
So the Recreation Cove. So as I'm sure everyone recalls, the Recreation Cove, we looked at a few different options here. So this was not nourished last fall as part of the project. And we have seen significant sand loss, especially during the last storm in January.
When was this picture taken?
This picture was taken on, I think, January 14th, maybe the 15th, so shortly after the January storm. So just a reminder of a couple other close-up photos of the site that we looked at last time. So you can see here, this was right after the storm, that we have a lot of geotextile fabric and larger rocks that are starting to be exposed. The beach area is very small here, and it's hard to see in the distance here, but here's the playground structure for one of the playgrounds there, and that footing has now been exposed, and so that shade structure is at risk. It's kind of tough to see, but you're actually seeing the bottom of the footing right here. So not too long, it's going to be completely exposed and not supported. So with that said, we had also talked at the previous meeting about Smith Group felt that the underwater weir and the reduced gap were not ideal for this cove. This cove is a little unique. I'm going to go back here.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Always
Something I don't
listen.
know.
Jeff, could you try it again?
I'm going to try one more time. So, for this cove, one thing that Smith Group felt was that we were seeing almost more sand loss than in some of the other coves. And one thing that they've come back to us with, and they're making a suggestion, is now, generally speaking, when the sand moves along the shoreline, it's going to move from north to south. And if you notice here in this cove, you see sand build up here. You don't see any sand build up here. And so the thought is that we're having some of the sand actually migrate through the larger armor stone in the breakwater. In this breakwater here, there was an existing sheet pile. There isn't anything here. And so it's passing through. And so they had a suggestion to try to reduce some of that migration. And with that said, I'm going to show this. So we had talked about possibly bringing in sand in this area because the current situation with the playground, it's not usable. There's no space for anyone to recreate there, and so we talked about not being able to utilize that cove. So this shows their recommendation at this time for sand placement. This would be about 35 feet out from that shade structure that we looked at, also from the bench. This would be the placement of the sand, similar to the other coves, and then it would spread out. And what I wanted to point out in particular was, it says here, a cobble barrier, about 145 feet. So this was to address the concern that we're having significant loss of sand through this breakwater. So it would be placing a smaller rubble stone on the inside of the breakwater to help to reduce that. And for a little bit of an explanation on that, I'm going to I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to show a picture here. This was taken in 2015, shortly, I believe, sometime in maybe the summer of 2015, so maybe a little bit after the opening. This is that breakwater we were just talking about, that most further south breakwater that's curved. There used to be sand here, but you can see what's happened is this sand was lost. And so obviously what's happening here, you have this ravine that was created because the sand is passing through these large openings in the armor stone. So once again, the thought was that if we were to re-nourish this beach, it would be recommended that we would place some smaller stone in here to help kind of fill some of those gaps. And so with that said, if we were to go with option one, which would be sand nourishment, along with placing the additional rubble layer, construction documents from Smith Group would be $11,200. Estimated construction would be $293,800 for a total project of $305,000. And then the other option would be to simply do sand nourishment without the additional cobble along the breakwater. And you'll see here, there's a reduced cost in the construction documents. It's $7,000. Construction estimate, $243,000. So it's a total project of $250,000. So the estimate right now would be for an additional approximately $50,000. We would do that additional work. It's obviously an economy of scale. You're going to have the contractor on site as well. So that was the second option. And then in the interpretive cove, as we talked about, this is the area where we have the shade structure footing that's exposed. And so our third option would be if we were to not bring in sand, not do anything with the breakwater, staff feel that this is not a safe cove to keep open. So the option would be to close the cove. We would also not be able to utilize this particular playground. The smaller playground here we'd be able to use, but not the larger one. And we'd also need to remove the shade structure. And that would involve running a fence approximately along the area here on the east side of the boardwalk, and then in between the two playgrounds along here. And the cost to purchase the fence and also hire a contractor to remove the shade structure would be $13,000.
Jeff, with that third option, can you still access the beach from the parking lot above?
You can still access the site, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we would keep it where you still come down the parking lot, you come down the stairs here, you just wouldn't be able to enter this cove.
Okay. So the fence is really closer,
A lot.
further
It'd be
away?
right up against the boardwalk on the east
Oh,
side.
okay, okay.
On the lake side. And I know there had been some discussion and concern at the last meeting about the stability of the bluff. This is something, so again, we went back to Smith Group again and discussed. And due to the elevation of the back of the beach, they feel very strong that our erosion of our toe of our bluff is not at risk here.
Good. It'd be interesting to see the picture slightly south, because, which is not our property at that point. But slightly south, it looks like the water's getting very close to the edge of the bluff. Well,
Any other questions or comments on Cove 3?
What's the status of obtaining grants or other type of funding to help mitigate the cost of this?
I'll let you go for that.
So for the first and the second cove, so the interpretive cove and the swimming cove, we have applied for hazard mitigation funding through FEMA. The challenge is that it's a long process, and they've made that very clear to us. So we've submitted a pre-application at this time. I believe it's sometime in March we would find out if we'd be invited to submit a full application. And then at that point, it would go through a process, and we were actually on a conference call recently with FEMA, and they said this could take well over a year. So what it would not allow us to do is to do the work relatively soon. But the way we set up our application is that we are asking for construction cost so that we could be poised and ready to go with the drawings. So we can still move forward with construction drawings at this time for the revetments in the first two coves. It won't impact the possibility of that funding. There'd be a point later this year where we'd have to make a decision whether we want to bid it out, and we would forego the opportunity. But by that time, we'll know if we were asked for a full application.
Will we forego the opportunity, or we would just have to front the money with hoping that we would receive the grant on the back end and reimburse us?
My understanding with this particular grant is that you would not be able to do the work until you were awarded the grant.
Got it.
I have a, do you want to discuss the other potential FEMA?
Oh, for Park Avenue?
Well,
Oh.
the sand
yes.
is potential as well,
Yeah,
correct? So-
that's true. I forgot about that. So we, Rebecca Grill and I actually had a meeting this morning with FEMA and IEMA, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency. So as people have heard, I'm certain, in the news, there's disaster declarations, the state's trying to get funding from the federal government for assistance. And it's kind of all focused around this January storm we had. And so communities along the shoreline have been asked to submit any damage they have. So we first submitted for the Park Avenue parking lot. Obviously, there was damage in that lot where the boat storage is.
Oh, good. To the
Far-
south, the
far-
south
far
portion.
south,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
There was damage there prior to the storm, but obviously related to high lake levels. We obviously seen some impact since that storm, so we submitted that to them, and we also submitted, in particular with the third cove, the significant loss of sand we have from that particular storm. And so they have our documentation. They're moving through a process where it's hard to say exactly what the timeline will be. It could be a number of months, it could be longer, that the federal government may make a decision to award the state funds, and then we would work with the Illinois Emergency Management Agency for those funds. So the long explanation is, to this point, with this potential funding, we would be able to do the work now, and we could be refunded for the work. It would be a 75-25 match. So they pay 75% of, let's say, if we were to re-nourish this, possibly up to 75%. But I will say, and I do want to stress, that it's very preliminary, and we aren't at a point where we're into the details, and so it's unclear at this point what portion of that nourishment they would still cover. They've made it clear that's something we would work with them later on. The way they expressed it was, do what you need to do, to run your operations and protect, and then they have our information on what we're asking for, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to be refunded on some of it.
Just quickly, I heard you say about the sand passing through that. Is that just a result of these unusual weather patterns, the high lake water level, the storm surge? Can it be traced to any kind of design flaw or anything like that? Because when you go back to the 2015 picture, you're saying something was already being created there. Was that naturally supposed to happen? And if so, is that what's leading the leakage? Do you know these? Yeah.
So I can answer to the best of my ability. This is something that Smith Group has come to us now suggesting was occurring, and then from there pulled up from a file an older picture from some time back. So from seeing that picture from a number of years ago, it looks like it was occurring at that time as well. I will say that I've yet to hear back, but I have reached out to the Army Corps to discuss this particular cove with them, obviously because they were involved in the project. So hopefully I'll have more to report on that in the future.
Jeff put his finger on the differences, and I think it's evident from this picture. Along the north berm, there's, I forgot what, a groin in there, a steel groin. That's been there for probably 60 years.
It's buried.
It's buried under
Yeah.
the rocks. There is no such thing on the other cove. So you have the rocks, which are just piled one on the other, and it's very porous. Water comes in, goes out, sand comes in and goes out.
But is that what it's designed to do? I get the water. That's I guess is what I'm asking.
No.
Okay.
Do you have any good news?
So, Jeff,
Save money on auto insurance.
Any other questions or comments on the recreation code?
well, let's talk about the whole picture, because I think that's really, and
That was good one, Terry.
and the grants that you're talking about.
Mhm.
For coves 1 and 2, or whatever we're gonna call them, the swimming cove and the interpretive cove, I don't think, we can't wait a year to get the funding, possible funding, and weather another series of storms, because if it keeps going, the damage is just gonna be exacerbated. So it would be nice if we get grants for that, but I don't think they're on the calendar for this, for the work we have to do.
So the good news, Cal, is
Oh.
that we don't have to make the decision on whether we're doing work this fall today, but what we're hoping to get approval for is moving forward with the construction documents, so that we will be ready down
In
the
the
road.
event
to
you
make
come
this.
back to us with a request for approval of some portion of the work.
Yeah, we'll certainly. So here, I'm gonna move to, just gonna kind of summarize all of everything we talked about. So for the interpretive cove, the recommendation is the back of the beach revetment, and staff are recommending, moving forward with construction documents with Smith Group, total of $25,500. This is task 1A in the attached, proposal from Smith Group in the board packet.
Can I just ask a question? What's the shelf life of the construction documents? If, let's say we do them now, we authorize them to be done, how long will they be good for? 'Cause I'm sure there's changing conditions down there.
Certainly, I can talk to Smith Group about that particularly, but we're certainly looking at doing something that we may do sometime late next year.
So if we do construction documents now, that we will not have to redo them next year? Let's say we postpone this project for a year.
Yeah,
Would we have to redo those, or those documents will still be good?
no, that would be our understanding, is they would be good. I can certainly confirm that with them
Yeah.
before we enter into a contract,
Okay,
but that's
please.
the understanding.
All right, please.
The one thing I will say, though, is the estimates that I was sharing, the cost estimates for the construction would likely change.
Yeah, those would, based on what we bid them out at.
Yeah,
Okay.
but once again, if we're looking at the cost estimates this year and we do this a year or a year and a half later, those cost estimates could very well change. So for the swimming cove, staff's recommending a back of beach revetment. That's task 2A in the attached proposal for construction documents at $13,200. Now for the recreation cove, I'll just go through the three options we reviewed. We have option 1, which was sand nourishment and rubble placement. So Smith Group has made it clear that if we were to put sand in this cove, we are going to lose some of it at this time. However, it would allow us to protect the playground and the shade structure and to utilize that cove this summer. And their recommendation at that time would be to add the rubble placement, which would help to reduce the amount of sand that would be lost through that breakwater. And that's listed as task 3 for option 1, and that's construction documents are $11,200. Second option would be just the sand nourishment minus the rubble placement. That's also task 3A. That's task 3A in the attached proposal. We had a separate proposal for the first option. That's $7,000. And the third option would be not to renourish, but instead staff would install fencing and have the shade structure removed. And that would be $13,000.
Was there any permitting requirements for any of this?
For the placement of the sand, no, we currently have a 10-year permit to nourish the beaches, and we would be doing the rubble placement as part of that permit.
And what about interpretive in the swimming cove? Is there any?
Yeah, there would be, but that permitting work is part of Smith Group scope. for
And
construction documents.
what's the timing in getting the permitting done? How long does it take to get it?
So at this time, Smith Group feels that we would be able to get permits in time to do the work this fall. The good news is we talked about a lot of other things we're doing offshore. When we're doing permitting for these revetments, it's not offshore, so it's definitely a different type. It's not as extensive
is it
as building
IDNR?
structure.
Who's the permitting agency?
Yeah, that would be one of the agencies we would work with.
It's IDNR?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the end of my formal presentation?
So what are you looking for from us
Well,
tonight?
have to-
staff is asking for approval for task 1A and task 2A, and then staff is looking for a direction on an option for the recreation code.
Okay.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion to authorize Executive Director Romes to enter into an agreement with Smith Group for the scope of work, including Task 1A, interpretive code construction documents for a fixed fee lump sum of $25,500, plus reimbursable cash expenses. Task 2A, the swimming code construction documents for a fixed fee lump sum of $13,200, plus reimbursable cash expenses. Option 1, Task 3A, recreational code construction documents, a fixed fee lump sum of $11,200, plus reimbursable cash expenses. And option 2, Task 3A, the recreational code construction documents for a fixed fee lump sum of $7,000, plus reimbursable cash expenses.
I'd like to,
I don't think we need to do that.
Yeah.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
the motion is it's option 1 or option 2
for the Rec Cove,
For the rec
for the
code.
Red Cove, yes.
I'd like to
So the
make,
discussion, and then there'll have to be a remotion for what you actually are going to recommend.
okay.
Or
I'd like-
if.
I'd like to make a motion to approve task 1A and 2A, and we'll discuss the next part secondly.
Well, I'll second the motion, assuming we could still have some discussion about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second it then.
So the motion was for 1A
And 2A.
2A, not for the recreation code at
I
all.
want- I'm splitting them.
As
Yeah.
my notes say, is there any additional discussion on the motion?
I think we should have a discussion. I think we should break it off into 1A, 2A, and then obviously it's not before us right now, it's actually the Recreation Cove. With regard, my opinion is with regard to 1A, it's necessary. We've talked about this all along. I think, but for the addition of the bird's eye sand, we would have a much bigger issue than we have right now. So I think this board made a very wise decision several months ago to replenish that interpretive code to protect the existing structures, but more needs to be done. And I believe that we should be prepared, depending on what happens this summer when we have to pull the trigger on, so it's probably bad words, when we have to make a decision moving forward, but we need to be ready to move forward. So with regard to 1A, I fully support that. With regard to 2A, I'd like to hear discussion from among my fellow board members. I agree with what Terry had said earlier with regard to having the protection, the revetment for that 173 feet. I don't think it's necessary to have that 240 feet. I think that we'll be able to save some money there. Again, I'd like to be prepared to move on that if we make a decision sometime in the future. And I think we need to basically have our due diligence completed and have it teed up and ready to go. So I'll be supportive of both 1A and 2A, but I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity. I think it's important for anybody who has a differing opinion, especially about 2A, to speak or forever hold your peace, so to speak.
I'm totally in agreement with what Cal said,
I am
whatever it
as
is.
well. We,
Hmm?
my short-winded version is yes.
Okay.
No, we need to protect it.
Yeah.
We heavily invested in it. We have vetted this issue for months now. And all this is doing is letting staff head into the first stage, getting the construction documents ready if we decide to move forward.
I agree.
I'd call the question.
So let me do this.
We didn't hear.
Oh, does Lori have any
Who's
comments?
Lori?
Yeah, no, I'm good. It's the recreation code I want to discuss.
So you can call roll.
Let's call roll on authorizing Executive Director Romes to enter into an agreement with Smith Group for the scope of work, including Task 1A and Task 2A, as previously defined.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Flor Swicekoff?
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
Yes.
President Kaplan?
Yes. Okay. Now let's open it up to option 1, Task 3A, option 2, Task 3A, the recreational code.
Do you want a motion and then have a discussion? You want to have the discussion now?
I move we have construction documents prepared for task 3A, knowing that within that it includes basically task 3A, which is the sand nourishment. So I don't think there's going to be, may not be much difference between the two.
I'll second the motion, subject to obviously further discussion.
Okay. Now, is there any discussion on the motion?
I'm concerned again with my point about that sand, and any sort of, I don't know, it was many years ago, but I don't understand why that thing during good weather was failing. So, will it happen again? Will someone fess up and say, yeah, we blew the design on that? Or, yeah, I just don't know what I don't know in regards to that southern end wall. That's supposed to do its job and apparently necessarily isn't. So I don't know if that plays into it. It seems to me that the full way to fix it is 3A, the option 1. But, I mean, you obviously had some suspicions yourself since you said you were going back in.
Well, this was Smith Group that we were working with Smith Group to determine what we could do to retain sand and why we were losing sand in that cove. This was something they came back to us with, and then we found that photo.
So is there a professional opinion about that from our staff? About what they saw and what should or shouldn't be happening with that sand?
Like I said, I've reached out to the Army Corps to
Right.
discuss this with them. I have yet to connect with them. But I don't think staff disagree with what Smith Group is saying is likely happening.
Right. Is that a benign thing, what's happening? Or is that a malignant thing that's happening? I guess I'm trying to figure out if there's something flawed there.
I think we worked with Smith Group to come up with an option that would help to retain that sand. Now, I will stress that if we were to put sand at this water level in that cove, even if we kind of plug up some of those openings, we're still going to lose some of that sand due to the current lake levels. But staff feels that if the board chose to nourish that cove, that it certainly would make sense to address what we think now might be a concern with some loss of sand in that breakwater.
And I think the only person who could give you a professional opinion would be Margaret if she was here.
And that's certainly something we can do for the next
Or
meeting
the
if
Army
you like.
Corps themselves,
Which will not.
which we've reached out to.
Yes.
Okay.
They've got bigger issues than,
They have-
In our recreational club.
I understand that. So, again, having not been here when this was originally designed, I think I'm a little bit further back from the whole situation. It didn't sound like there's any appetite for option 3. I mean, you've built this beautiful, lakefront swimming area. I was noticing that down the lake there are other towns that are closing certain beaches, and maybe leaving it lay fallow will give us a greater understanding of what's happening there. I'm thinking a lot about option 3, especially given the money that we have to spend on 1A and 2A, not to mention any other lakefront properties that we would need to
But
assess.
we're not deciding today, if I'm understanding what you're saying, we're not deciding today whether or not to do the projects.
Understood.
We're just deciding today if we want them to enter into a contract to do the construction documents in the event 6
Absolutely.
months we want to do the project.
Right, and I'm convinced that 1A and 2A, that is a positive thing, to pay that money to get the front end of it and then vote later on the full amount. I'm just not so sure about the recreation code.
So to address the timeline for this timeline, it would be very different than the timeline for the swimming cove and the interpretive cove. So obviously, option 3 is talking about this coming summer. The need to address the shade structure and add the fencing. So if we were to move forward with option 1 or 2 for the recreation cove, you're correct. It doesn't obligate us to the work, but we would be moving pretty quickly with this. We would need to have this bid out probably by late March in order to be able to complete the work before the opening of the beach for the summer.
Is there overlap between Recreation Cove Option 1 and Option 2, the sand nourishment construction documents?
Yes, one is just for the sand placement, one's the sand placement plus the additional rubble placement.
To prevent the sand.
Right, no, but
Yes.
are we better off? No, I'll
Well,
wait.
that's why I suggested, when I said it, that the sand nourishment and rubble replacement will subsume within the sand nourishment that's in option 2.
Right.
That was your question too, I think, Jeff.
Yeah, that's why they're separate, it would be one of each.
Then it-
But, like I said, while the board wouldn't be making the decision now to move forward with the sand nourishment, in a sense, we'd be very much moving in that direction, different from the swimming cove and the recreation cove, as we would need to make a decision on whether we pick that up relatively soon.
But this way we have the plans and understand what's involved.
Yeah.
I think Terry brings up a very good point. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm still wrestling with it, but the good point he brings up is that other communities are closing their beaches. Wilmette, I believe, closed the beach last year. Who knows if they're going to reopen? I know that other towns are having real issues keeping their beaches open. Now, we have made a commitment to keep the interpretive code, to protect the interpretive code. We've made a commitment, it sounds like, to move forward to protect the swimming cove. We made that commitment last fall when we voted to replenish the sand there. But this board also made the determination last fall not to re-nourish the recreation cove. We made the conscious decision not to do it, and as a result, we have the issues that we have there right now, because it sounds like that the work that we did last fall with replenishing both the interpretive cove and the swimming cove worked and preserved our improvements down there. But we didn't do that at the recreation cove for a reason. We want,
Well, there are
that
no
was-
improvements to protect.
yeah, but we also felt that was the least, I don't want to say least important of the three coves. And we decided not to make the investment there. So the question is, and which is well stated, is that do we want to throw $11,200 for construction documents of something we may not do? If we're comfortable as a community fencing that off and removing that structure and only having 2 coves that are active, or do we want to make the investment into the recreation cove? I'm just posing the question. I'm not saying I'm advocating one way or the other, but I think that's really the policy decision we need to make tonight, is what we're going to do with that third cove. Are we going to try to protect it? Because we were successful in protecting the interpretive code in the swimming cove. We made the right decision. The question is, do we go back and try to protect the recreation cove? We have a huge investment there. And not to, we're basically praying for lower lake levels. That's the only way is for the recreation cove to be usable in the future. If we don't do this, if we don't take these steps, the only way the recreation cove becomes usable is if lake levels go down. And unless I'm missing something.
No, and even then, you would need some nourishment once the lake levels do go down. You will need some nourishment, not to this extent.
And I'm not proposing to advocate a point. I'm just saying is that I think that's really the threshold question that we need to ask and answer tonight.
Well, if Margaret was here,
Mhm.
I would ask her if there is an option 4, which is sand nourishment in the area of the fence, the playground area.
It's funny you asked that. We asked that question already,
Okay.
Brian.
And the answer was?
It was your question, so I'm going to give you credit.
Yeah,
I can give the response.
actually, I don't think there was a clear answer.
The answer was no, the answer was no. You wouldn't want to do that, because if you're just placing it in that one area, that sand's still going to migrate, and it's not going to serve the purpose. If you remember, the way we nourished the swimming cove was we didn't place it all the way up to the breakwaters, because we knew that sand was going to move that way. And so the understanding was that if we were going to nourish that cove, it would need to be a significant amount throughout the whole cove.
Okay.
You know, and all these items, we didn't budget for this. I mean, I assume we did.
We do have $550,000 budgeted this year and $600,000 budgeted in the 2021 capital plan. All of this would fit within that total between the 2 years.
So we did budget for this.
For this lakefront property or for all the lakefront properties?
Just for Rosewood.
For Rosewood. We had dollars in the budget this year for possible nourishment of the beach
Mhm.
and also for revetment.
So this was contemplated when we did the capital plan.
I would like to spend the $11,000. I don't think it's money thrown away.
And I'm sitting here listening, and I agree. That we made significant investments on this beach as a whole. And if we can save half the usable beach, then I'm all for it. And at this point in time, all we're doing is asking someone to take a look and get us ready in the event we want to do it. We don't have to do it in the fall, but if we decide to do it,
No, this work
We would do
we
it
would
in
need to make a
spring.
decision on this work within
That's
a
right.
matter of weeks.
But that's all right.
that's okay.
That's really, both the option one, the sand nourishment and the rubble replacement will be done in the second quarter of this year?
We would need it done before the beach opens.
Okay,
So
okay.
we would need
You're
to,
right.
we would need to
Yeah.
bid it out. So we would want that bid to be released by at the end of March.
So this is the pressing issue, is the recreation cove more than the other two, because we already invested in the other two by putting in the bird's eye sand.
I still say I am for looking into the construction documents and the total cost to do the project. We've just invested too much in this property.
And
It
that's
might
a-
not be cost effective to do it, but we need to know.
And that's a very well-used area for recreation.
Lori?
So I definitely wouldn't spend $13,000 for the option to put up a fence and really restrict that area. I would think the 11,000 would be money better spent. What my question is, as far as options 1 and 2, do both of those options allow for both the playgrounds to be open? Or does one playground have to give, or how does that work?
No, exactly. This would be developing the construction documents so that we could then bid out for a contractor to come in and bring in sand. So we would not have to close the playground this summer. Obviously, we know that there could be some sand loss, so it's difficult to say whether or not we would have erosion very quickly again. Or not. We're going to have the bird's eye sand, which we know is more stable, but we don't know what would happen. So for this summer, we'd be confident that we'd be able to have the playground open.
Both?
And in
the entirety
addition,
of the playground.
yeah, both playgrounds, yes. And so just to clarify, this would be to bid it out, and then the estimated cost for the total project would be $250,000 for the contractor and the placement of the sand.
305.
Oh, because we're talking about option 1, thank you, 300,000.
So the rubble replacement is on the exterior, when you say rubble?
It's on the interior. So see in this picture here, it's this blue line.
You know, Jeff, if you show the picture of the gap,
Oh yeah,
that.
it would be along
It's going to
here.
fill in that gap.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would be along here.
Or as he politely called it, a ravine.
So either option would make both playgrounds usable. It's just a matter of getting rid of that ravine.
So
Oh, but you get
I
rid-
think we would probably not recommend the second. It was an option given to us, but if we're going to spend the money to put in the extra sand, we want to make sure we protected it so that sand did not wash away again through those rocks. So frankly, even though she gave it to us as an option, option 2 really is not a good
Agree,
option
yeah.
that
I mean,
staff would
if-
recommend.
if the board were to choose to nourish the cove, we would certainly recommend option 1 for that.
and these literally were updated an hour before this meeting, so.
So we're back to the question becomes, do we want to approve option 1, task 3A, construction documents for the nourishment and rubble replacement, I'll call it, for the recreational code?
Well, I feel strong that it's a very popular destination for young families, as well as like play dates. So part of nature is exposing the kids to it when they can. So I don't know why we wouldn't. And it sounds like this ravine is kind of dangerous, if not anything, right?
Well, this ravine would be addressed if we went with option 1 over option 2. But option 3 would be not to expend the $300,000 for the cove.
Right, but
And
option 3
that wouldn't be
won't
an
permit us,
option.
that
Be-
wouldn't permit us to have the playgrounds.
Right.
Right.
Wouldn't permit it to have one of the playgrounds, that's correct.
Yeah.
But the ravine would not be an issue at that time because there's water there.
Okay, yeah.
Gary? Any more? Cal?
It's unfortunate that we have to deal with this, but again, as if I'm repeating myself at other meetings, this is something that we're not alone dealing with issues at the lakefront. Other communities have some issues more significant than this that they're dealing with. However, I don't know what their situation is, but as Brian told us tonight, is that we had the foresight to include the cost of doing this within our capital budget for this year and for next year. And what that means, most importantly, is that the work we do here, we will not have to try to go into our reserves to pay for it because we have the money already allocated for it, and therefore it will not negatively impact anything else in the district. So we could still do everything else we plan on doing within our capital plan. We don't have to move money around to do it because we passed the budget, we had the foresight to plan for this. So as a result, since it's not going to negatively impact the rest of the district, but will be significantly beneficial to an important facility in our town. I mean, one of the, when I have guests from out of town, one of the places I take them is to Rosewood Beach and to show it off. And so I agree with the majority here, and I'll support 1A, 3-1A.
Call the question.
Okay. Anybody else? Can I get a motion to authorize executive?
You already had a motion, you just need a roll call.
Okay.
There's a motion, there's a second already. So there's a motion to approve.
Right, so we just need a
Okay.
roll
Yeah.
call.
Can I get a roll call on option 1, task 3A?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg?
No.
Commissioner Flor Swyskoff?
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
Yes.
President Kaplan?
Yes. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Something a little lighter? Treasurer's report?
No, this is my point.
Thanks, Jeff.
Are you ready, Cal?
Are you ready with your question, Cal?
Yeah, if I could find it.
Why don't we get the report and then you can,
Okay.
Okay. Good evening. We presented to you 3 payroll disbursements in January, and that happens from time to time. It's just a timing issue. That came to about $900,000, and then we also presented to you bills that came to just a little under $700,000 for total disbursements of about $1.6 million.
Okay. And Barney, you went through.
we did, and didn't we approve them up here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were
We're part of
approved
the
as
consent agenda.
consent
They were approved.
agenda.
Okay.
And so we're confirming the numbers.
That's right.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Also, in the treasurer's report, we went over the 5 funds that we have. The special rec fund and the debt service fund were basically on target with budget. The capital projects fund came in under budget, as timing and billing for each project is difficult to determine. And we will continue to spend more money on capital in February, and we would expect the gap to close as the year progresses. As far as general and recreation funds, as we just discussed, that there were 3 payrolls in January It's important to note that roughly $100,000 of that payroll, so that would be the entire first payroll, the payroll from January 3rd, as well as several days of the January 17th payroll, were actually payroll related to December of 2019. And so those costs were allocated back, which means you actually had less than 2 payrolls in January expenses, so that contributes to the favorable variance of payroll. Additionally, the PDERMA bill for insurance, the one that came in January, was for December, so that gets allocated back to 2019. And the January bill for PDERMA insurance came in February and was paid in February, and so is not reflected in January numbers, and that's to the tune of roughly $200,000. So that's the bulk of the difference in your numbers in the general and recreation funds, and those will make up over as the year progresses. The gap will close. It just happens that we had 3 payrolls, and the insurance bill comes in arrears. And that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
I just have one comment.
Okay.
Comment or question?
It's a comment, actually. I was reading the year-to-date, January 2020, and when I looked at the Center 21 camps, I was somewhat surprised that it's operating at a 2,173% deficit. I don't know if you noticed that. Those are pretty big numbers there.
Now, hold on, let me see, this pulls straight off of, and
2,173,000%.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, could you reference the page, please?
It's, I don't know.
How'd that get past Barney? Is what-
Yeah. That's supposed to be no revenue and a lot of these expenses.
So,
It's on, it's
oh, yeah, I do see that. Yes, 128. I do see
50 cents
that.
worth of revenue.
Yes, so.
I think that's going to turn around this year, don't you think?
I'm hoping so.
Okay, thank you.
I'll ask Mariana, but.
No,
I'm
our
sure-
accounting structure recognizes the revenue in June when camps start, as our budget indicates. It shows the revenue immediately, so that revenue will catch up.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact,
50 cents. I hear our camps are selling out, so.
Excuse me?
That correction to the budget has been submitted to the finance department, so you won't see it next month.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, it will
You know,
be.
it's funny, because we've seen anomalies like that before.
Yeah.
Usually, we don't bring them up to,
Well, it was 2 million%, so it's like, you don't see that number very
Cal,
often.
yeah. When it gets to
All is well.
5 million, that's when I get nervous. Okay. All right, any other questions?
Thank you,
or
that's right.
comments?
Thank you. All right, new business, Parks Foundation update, Commissioner Grossberg to present.
Hi, thanks. So we had another good meeting. We have a real solid crew there, still looking for probably 3 or 4 more people, but the people we have there seem locked in and have roles to play. I think we need more depth on our offensive line. So I seriously mean that, because in their governance, they're trying to have not only a treasurer, but an assistant treasurer, so that the assistant can learn the ropes for moving somebody on. And we have a very top-heavy executive board. I can't remember if that's what we're calling it, but we have a president. We don't really have a vice president, but we have a treasurer who's also the secretary, and sort of thing. And if any one of them should get transferred to Bali or something like that, we would be in trouble. So we need more depth off the bench and more people to just populate the general board, so that we can have more people step into leadership there, so that we don't rely on any 1 or 2 people too much. They have 2 big events coming up. I wanted to share this with each of the board members. If you could, oh, sorry, here, I don't need one. So the Champions Banquet, I know, Chris, you
Take one, pass it down.
you can probably give a better update than I can, but it's on Thursday, April 30th. And do you have anything you want to say about it? Swimming.
Very well put.
Okay. So we once again, I'm encouraging all board members and anybody here as guests Chris Chelios is our guest speaker, who a Chicago boy that will probably have a lot of great and colorful insight as to playing hockey for like 50 years, like he did, and
University of Wisconsin, I think, too.
and I think it'll be a very engaging guest. We're looking for, obviously, people to come. We're looking for people to donate items to the silent and the live raffle. We're looking for people to buy tables. We're looking for all the above. Any help that you get. We're looking for businesses to sponsor. And so on the sheets I've handed you, you can see what is available there for a person who wants to give $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000. We're looking not to duplicate what we do at some of our other big events, but to find new people so that we don't keep hammering the same. The other big event that's coming up is Sunday, I believe it's April 5th, is once again the shrimp boil at Bluegrass. A few of us went last year and had a really nice time, even if we don't like shrimp. So, but he puts on quite a great
What time's that?
gastronomic. It is noon to 3, I believe. There's still some details up in the air about it. Last year it was $75 and it was all you can eat and all that stuff. And all that goes to the foundation. And so that's another great opportunity. Jim at Bluegrass has been very, very generous with his time and his restaurant to help us out. So he really needs us to sell out the joint, and that is something, I think it's something like 70, if I remember.
Oh,
last
the
year,
quantity of people?
Yeah,
70
I think
-ish.
he needs it. Last year, the restaurant was full, but it wasn't sold out. So it'd be really great if we could get that completely sold out. That gives us a chance to make some decent money, and it gives a chance for the restaurant, obviously, to show off what they have and to make a little money themselves. So those are the two big things, other than, like I said, governance has become a big issue with them, trying to connect more with the greater Highland Park community, and also engaging Highwood, because now that we have our FYI program, it involves the Highwood kids and the swimming program, which is doing well. The other program that we're looking at is the golf scholarship. So we have this tremendous scholarship, and as of right now, as of last week, we only have 2 people that have applied. So we're looking for middle school or high school boys or girls that are interested in golf but maybe have some challenges, and this would be a great way to get them, lift them up. So if anybody is particularly friendly with coaches or local people that might know of any students that would be interested in this or would do well for doing it, we really want to know who they are. We have more money than we're willing to give 2 people for that. So we want it. We would love to have it be 10 or 20 people.
I forwarded it to Coach Harris, who's the boys' coach.
All right, great.
So if, someone forwarded it to the girls' coach at the high school?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Yep, and there's an application for that online on our website.
Yeah.
Have the tickets for the Champions Banquet gone on sale yet?
Yes.
How are we doing?
We're right on par with where we've been.
What's the capacity of the event?
Approximately 225, 240.
And I assume we've reached out to the Falcons and that whole league?
And
What
this
are we-
is, sorry, just to interrupt, I just want to add on to that this is the foundation's big fundraiser. This is the one that we're hoping to grow to be that, 100K sort of thing. Right now, we're more in the 30, 40, which is great. But the more we can get, the more we can give.
How do we pull in other sports? Because I feel like, when we had Coach Ditka, well, I guess we didn't have the football team, but, in the past with baseball, we had our T-ball, and there's ways to market to those groups. But how else can we bring in, I mean, obviously the Falcons, you're going to have the hockey fans coming, but how do we get other sports involved and a bigger audience.
Email blast?
No, but what are we doing, like, other than, at the auctions, I know you try to do have a variety of items, so there's not just hockey.
Yeah, I think the nature of the event isn't as specific to one particular sport. I think the event lends itself to recognizing, volunteers and staff members that facilitate a lot of our athletic programs. I think while it's easy to say that the event is focused around one sport based on who the speaker is, that's really not the spirit of it.
Okay.
We do reach out to all of our athletic participants and the sport in which they participate, informing them about the event, soliciting them to purchase tickets or tables or what have you. And it's just more so word of mouth and, utilizing our relationship with people in the door.
And other than the coaches, which I've noticed they're the same coaches every couple of years that win the awards, have we ever considered doing something for an athlete, like a for sport, or like a good sport? They don't have to be like the most athletic, but a
That's
team
great point.
player.
We haven't yet awarded an award for sportsmanship or something along those lines. Certainly we give consideration to that.
Yeah, I think that might be neat because, again, when you have kids nominated, or I don't know if they're told ahead of time that they're going to win or they're going to be presented, their family and friends will come out.
Sure.
Versus just the coaches. Like I said, we have a handful of coaches, that are really strong, but it's just it seems to be a circulating award. I think it'd be a good way to get get family members of the teammates and,
I think that's one thing might help is that
Hold on, I think he was about to say it was a great idea.
I was going to say that was a great suggestion, Laurie.
What, Brian?
Let the record show. That was a great
We're
suggestion.
going to honor the executive director?
And,
I'm sorry?
and if he wouldn't have said it, I was going to say it. So, the date in April might help as well. Just being slightly before the crush of May might be helpful.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is the date of the event is largely predicated on the availability of the speaker. So while it's fallen mostly, the last 4 years have been in May, this happened to kind of hopefully open a new door and a new month for us. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, one of the really cool things of the event that I think gets overshadowed by the incredible speakers that we have at the event is that the participants in our programs do get to nominate the coach of the year, and when the coaches are invited to the banquet, some of them don't know they're getting the award, so it's a surprise to them. So it's really actually pretty cool to see them be surprised and receive an award for something that they do out of the for the love of the sport or for the love of the impact that they have. So that's a really cool part of the event.
Maybe we just add to the awards, and I hope
Yeah.
it goes without saying
Yeah.
that there'd be female and girls selected. Maybe you do it by the sport, or I don't know, but I think we just bring the athletes in
Yep.
and recognize that.
I will say, Chris, you've done a great job getting A-listers.
Yeah.
The speakers have been great. Fergie, Ozzy, Coach Ditka, they've been great and funny.
I thought Dennis Savard was
Yeah.
outstanding.
Yeah.
And I know Chris is pretty outgoing too, and I think that interaction is really
Yeah.
what makes it memorable.
Pretty outgoing.
Yeah.
I think we'll be all right.
I think we will.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to it.
Anything else? All right, next is director's report.
Yeah, just a couple things to point out. I definitely want to continue on Cal's comment regarding the camp numbers and the 1,000,000% difference. I will say camp is doing very healthy this year. Last year we had record enrollments for this time of year, and we're actually 29% above where we were last year. So we have very high summer camp enrollment numbers, and February 29th is the early bird discount deadline. Some of those camps are already full at this time of year, which is good and bad. Obviously, that's great. We love to see our camps full. There are wait lists, and encourage people, if there is a wait list, please do sign up for that wait list. Sometimes we do have openings, or we do add sections to a camp if we get enough people on a wait list. So again, that early bird discount ends February 29th. After that, camp registration is still open, but camp is doing well, and camp is filling up. Other than that, there's just a a few events coming up here in the next month. We have what I think is a very interesting event, the Maple Syrup Harvest. That's Sunday, March 15th from 10 to 11 at the Highland Nature Center, and that's a discovery class about how they derive sweet sugar from our maple trees. So that's $12 per person, ages 6 to adult. And this Friday, Sunset Valley, the 1390 restaurant, is back open, and we'll be having our first of a series of fish fries, Wisconsin-style fish
What day
fry.
is that, Friday or something?
This Friday is the first one, and it will continue for the following weeks. It's from 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's all you can eat, fish, vegetables, potato, dessert, soft drinks, and it's $17.50 for adults, $10.50 for children. Children 3 and under are free. So we hope that you come out to Sunset Valley. And then if you check out our website, we have a whole slew of spring break programs as well. STEM Girls is Monday, March 23rd. Crate Stacking Challenge at Highland Nature Center is also on that week, on that Monday. Up and Away to Space is on Tuesday, March 24th. And Can You Win It is on Tuesday, March 24th. So there are a series of spring break activities for your children to do over that time. If you're not going anywhere, you're having a staycation, have it at the Park District.
A few questions for you.
Okay.
First is from Mariana. How's circus camp number? How are circus camp numbers?
So that's actually Chris.
Sorry, Chris.
That's okay.
How are circus camp numbers
Yeah,
doing?
so as you may recall, last year we made the change in the program to be reduced to the 7, which is the 4-week camp.
Right.
And we've already hit our minimum, and we fully anticipated selling out.
Excellent.
And my question for you, Brian, is 1390 now open for the year or just Friday nights moving forward?
Just Fridays right now. So we anticipate it. So as soon as the golf course opens, which, depending on how climate change
Could've been
is to our favor,
Sunday.
as soon as the golf course opens, we will open the restaurant.
Okay,
But for now, it's just the Fridays.
okay. Any other board comments? Okay, is there someone from the public who would like to address the board? You know,
Just a couple.
come on up.
Peter Mordini, I live at 1853 Sheehan Court, Highland Park. Just curious, because I think Jeff kind of mentioned, had in the back of his head that he was going to, if you could talk a little about where we're at on the emergency relief funds or for the Park Avenue Beach. If there's any update on that, just curious on that.
Only on what Jeff presented, I think, with regards to the Park Avenue South Pad and the visit that with AIMA today. And so they have to submit our request. And then, Jeff, I don't know if you have information on the time frame with that, but I think it's up in the air.
We asked the tax frame, well, you just put it on.
Yeah, so.
No, they said it moves relatively slowly. But that, so what'll happen next is, at one point, there'll be a determination whether there is funding from the state. Then we'll work with IEMA to have that funded. As I said, this is different than a typical grant program in that we just need to move forward with our work, and then they would reimburse us for it, if it wasn't possible.
Right, I guess what areas are you stressing to, like the parking lot or?
Oh,
where
this
the
was
parking
this was for the parking lot, yeah. So it's, it had to be related to the January storm.
Right.
And it had to be something that we were not able to make an insurance claim.
Thank you.
You, Peter. Okay, anyone else? Can I get a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the following section of the Open Meetings Act? Section 2C21, the discussion of minutes lawfully closed under the Act, whether for the purposes of approval of said minutes or for considering the semi-annual review of the minutes, as set forth in Section 2.06 of the Act. In Section 2C29, for discussion between internal or external auditors and the board, and possible action by the board on items discussed in closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Roxanne, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg? Commissioner Flor Swyskoff,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Yes.
President Kaplan.
Yes, show that we are adjourned at 7:20. And does anybody want to take a break before we go into closed?
It shouldn't take long, should it?
Do you want to do it here or back in the office?
Let's sit here, let's
We can
let's
do it
take
here.
long, take 5 minutes.
We take 5 minutes.
Yeah.